Alright, so time for the second half of this Jund with Blue installment. So I kind of mentioned at the end of the last video, if you happen to watch that there were some changes that I was a little interested in making, just seeing kind of how they worked out. For instance, Dragon's Rage Channeler I didn't think was the additional threat that I really wanted, so we've cut those. Flusterstorm didn't really perform as hot as I wanted it to, so instead of Flusterstorm, we're running Drown in the Loch. So this is what we got for this league in the main deck. Some of the changes around. Swapped out the Wooded Foothills for Scalding Tarns, which I'm pretty sure I mentioned that in the video. Swapped out the Dragon's Rage Channelers for Drown in the Lochs in the main, plus a couple copies of Traverse the Ulvenwald. The second copy in place of the 7th 1-mana red removal spell. Drop the 3rd Unholy Heat. In the sideboard, we cut the Flusterstorms for Spell Pierces and Drown, added that 2nd Engineered Explosives that I talked about, and then cut the 4th Soul Guide Lantern for the 2nd Alpine Moon, and cut the 2nd Kroxa for the 3rd Turok. It's been a little bit better in the matchups that I want to see Turok in. So, anyway, yeah, this is what we got for the second league. Let's move this over and we can start going through some of these matches. So this looks like the first one. Alright, let's move you out of the way. Alright. First match, we would lose the die roll. Unfortunate. Pretty good hand on the draw. We've got Removal Spell or Ragavan for turn 1, depending on if we're up against another creature deck or like a combo deck. We've got Tarmogoyf on 2. Tarmogoyf's getting really big really fast. And it looks like we're up against Burn. So, important thing here to keep track of against Burn is what basics we can get when. I don't have a basic forest or mountain in this list, so basic swamps where we're looking at. So if I hadn't have drawn the second Bloodstained Mire, it would be pretty important to remember, like, I need to get Stomping Ground off of this first fetch so I can bolt the Swift Spear, and then I can get basic swamp off the Bloodstained Mire. Opens up all 3 of my primary colors and allows me to get down the Goyf with the least amount of damage possible. Bobble myself, because if I know I'm getting Stomping Ground, like I said, the plan goes out the window when you draw the second Bloodstained Mire. It doesn't matter so much. But I decide to bobble myself because I'm going to be fetching and shocking for this bolt regardless. So it doesn't matter if I do it on my turn or my opponent's turn, so I can see whether I want to draw that card or not. Opponent starts off with a Lava Spike. I'm just going to go ahead and Lightning Bolt in response to that for 2 reasons. One, them casting Lava Spike here means they don't have mana to cast Eidolon, which would be a more preferable Bolt target, but since they can't play it, I don't have to worry about holding up Bolt. 2, if I let this Prowess trigger resolve, then it means that I have to wait for them to make the first action on this Lightning Bolt, and they might not do that. So if I go to cast the Bolt, they can respond with the Bolt, save the Swift Spear. But if I bolt before this first Prowess trigger resolves, they can't save the Swift Spear, and they can't cast an Eidolon. Alright, so we get down Tarmogoyf. Pretty good size dude. Get to swinging. So they've got a Suspended Rift Bolt. I can get a Steam Vents off this Wooded Foothills. I think I may have swapped 2 Wooded Foothills for Steam Vents or 2 Wooded Foothills for Scalding Tarns and kept 1 Wooded Foothills. Or maybe I didn't swap it until after this league. Let's see. No, we're still on Wooded Foothills for this league. So I swapped them after this league. So, clarify there, this league still has Wooded Foothills, no Scalding Tarns. And then here I just decide like I'm going to save some damage. Like I'm presenting lethal, I'm just trying to not die right here. Which if opponent's casting spells, I kind of assume I'm dead. But then they pass turn, and if they pass turn when I just showed them counter magic and I'm tapped out, that means they're dead. Like they don't have anything. So let's go down. We see a bolt off the top of their library, which is great because now I can cast their bolt, and if they respond with something, I can cast my bolt. But as soon as they like have mana and they pass the turn, when I showed them counter magic, Alright, so game 2 against Burn on the draw. Talked about it a little bit in the last match. Sideboarding against Burn. In this list, I've got a little bit less to bring in since we don't have like 4 Flusterstorms and Terminates. So we're bringing in, or taking out Street Wraith, taking out a couple Thoughtseize, boarding in, took out a Ragavan on the draw too. Boarding out in the 2 Terminates, boarding in 1 Turok, the 2 Spell Pierces, the other Drowning Lock, and I boarded in 1 of the 2 Engineered Explosives. You don't want to just get like caught dead to something like Sulfuric Vortex or Sanctifier or Ensnaring Bridge. So since I'm not running K Command, which I'd normally bring in, the 1E kind of acts in that same slot of here's my scapegoat card. Hand's perfect against Burn. I've got the ability to Inquisition on 1 or kill something. I can get a basic on 2 to play Tarmogoyf. I've got Death Shadow if they start being overly aggressive. Opponent reveals a second copy of Death Shadow. So once they reveal the second Shadow, I just kind of decide like, hey, they're dealing damage to me. I'm just going to play into that. So what I want to do is kind of stop them from being able to flurry burn spells. So I see Lava Spike, the double Searing Blaze, which with 1 land in hand, I don't care about the Searing Blazes at all. So I'm just going to take the Path to Exile. The Lava Spike can't hit one of my creatures. So if they decide to fire that off and attack with Goblin Guide, like I've got room for 2 really big shadows. So they know that I've got 1 of these shadows. Their hand isn't incredibly conducive to dealing with 2 shadows. And then they just like go ahead and fire off double Lava Spike. So now I know their hand is double Searing Blaze. Even if they draw a land, they can't cast both of them. If they draw a non-Searing Blaze spell, or non-Searing Blaze burn spell, then I'm covered. So my thought here is the only thing that I'm dead to is a burn spell like Lightning Bolt, Boros Charm, Helix, something like that. So I'm just going to pass. My opponent could have like end of turn burn spell, untap land drop. I can't do anything about that. I can't stop it. All I can do is make them have it, and they don't. So last card could have been a Path to Exile, a Sanctifier, any creature, anything like that. No idea what it actually was, but either way, on to game 2, or on to match 2. Alright, win a die roll. I've talked about it in a previous video. It's ridiculous the percentage points you gain in Modern by winning the die roll. And I wish there was a way to even that out. We've theorized or theory crafted a little bit like, what if the person on the draw got a treasure token that's sacrificed at the end of the active player's first turn. So, like, I get a treasure token on my turn. It sacks at the end of your first turn when I'm on the draw. The other option is, like, you get to draw on your first turn as the active player. I get a treasure token until I don't want it anymore. Something like that. Alright, so on the play, if Ragavan lives, this hand is great. I've got Street Wraith to try to find a second land. If it doesn't live, I've got Lightning Bolt to clear out the way of a blocker if it lives. So, it's like, I wish something like this Kroxa were a second land, but overall it's a very solid keep. Definitely leading on Ragavan, because if it survives, it gives me the highest upside. And like we hoped, they played out something that we could kill with the Ragavan, so let's get cracking. Now I've got a Street Wraith, or a Thoughtseize that I can for sure cast. I really want to see more land drops, so what I can do here is Street Wraith first to see if I draw one. I don't, so I'm actually going to traverse off of this swamp to go ahead and get a second land, because I want to have that second permanent mana source. Like, I could just Thoughtseize off of the treasure and not have the second land, but then if my opponent like has a removal spell or finds a removal spell for Ragavan, then I'm just like stuck with one land not doing anything. And this is actually one of the more fun matches I had, because my opponent has registered the card Tombstalker. For anybody who doesn't know, this is a Gurmag Angler with an extra black pip for flying. But it's a rare from Future Sight, 8 mana, 2 black, and 6 generic. It's got Delve, so just like Gurmag Angler, you can exile your yard to get it online. And yeah, it's just a flying zombie fish, except I don't think it's a zombie or a fish. Nope, just a demon. So here they've got a second land, then get Tarmogoyf down next turn. If I find a land, I can drown in the lock. So I'm actually going to take that Tarmogoyf to try to make sure my Ragavan can connect for another turn. Like, I think if I find another land, I can race these Tombstalkers with double shadow. So at the moment, that is my thought process. Unfortunately, Wrenn is not another actual land. If I had a fetch in the yard, Wrenn would be a really great hit right now, because I could just go like Wrenn, get a fetch, play fetch, fetch shock, double shadow, and be in a great spot. But instead, I'm just gonna start knocking away resources. Like, I figure they're probably ditching the second Tombstalker, which they do not. So now I'm up against a 4-color shadow deck. Or not, I don't know if it's shadow or not. But when I see Tombstalker, Tarmogoyf, Channeler, Thoughtseize, I assume it's a Death Shadow deck. But either way, we'll knock a card out of hand. My opponent gets Stomping Ground here, which I think was a mistake. I'm assuming they've got like an Overgrown Tomb in their deck, but they get Stomping Ground when I know they have a Forest and double Tombstalker. So like, I know their 4 cards exactly, and this doesn't let them cast the Tombstalker. So they play Forest, go to pay costs, and this is why I think it was a mistake. They spend like a minute on this play paying cost and then concede. So I'm thinking they just like thought they were grabbing another Blood Crypt or an Overgrown Tomb or something, and just misclicked and grabbed the Stomping Ground, and we kind of got there off that. unfortunately Moto doesn't keep track of your library. So I don't know, like, if the next card had been a fetch land and I could have played out double Shadow next turn, there's a pretty good chance we're winning regardless. But would have been nice to know. Alright, so game 2 against the 4-color monstrosity. My sideboard plan, I board out a couple Wraiths and Inquisitions, which is like pretty much what I always do in the mirror. Boarded out a Ragavan on the draw because you don't want to get out tempoed by having like your opponent play a Ragavan, you play a Ragavan, they kill your Ragavan and attack with theirs. And then boarded in a couple copies of Soul Guide Lantern to try to fight over this whole Tombstalker situation. Boarded out the Battle Rages. Boarded in the 4th copy of Drown in the Loch as well. It's pretty much an all-star against everything that's not named exactly Tombstalker. Alright, so this hand disruption on 1, potentially a threat on 2, but I don't have any way of dealing with like a Dragon's Rage Channeler or Ragavan or anything. So I'm really hoping that like this being on the draw gives me the extra land drop. Which we get rewarded. Alright, and this is where the fun starts. So opponent kept in Battle Rage against a mid-range mirror, which is usually a pretty easy first cut. Like, Battle Rage is the card that's most likely to get you 2-for-1 in a matchup where you really can't afford to get 2-for-1. So, looking at opponent's hand, I don't have a way of dealing with the Tombstalker, and with double Channeler, they're going to be able to flip some cards into their yard pretty quickly. I could take the second Channeler and try to set up, like, Ren ping this Channeler, but ultimately I think that just plays into the Tombstalker. So, I decided to just take the Tombstalker, and I figure, like, one of these Wrens will get to kill one of these Channelers, and then they'll get Delirium, kill my Wren, and blah, 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 blah. So let's get rid of those. But if I can just use Wren to, like, fog for a turn or two, then it's not the worst line in the world. If they had something like a Lightning Bolt there and could bolt in response, I'd be in a lot of trouble, but gotta take some risks somewhere. So opponent draws, cycles Street Wraith, and they decided to just like Battle Rage the Channeler and kill the Wren. I guess they could have flipped over Delirium there, which would have let them attack for 6 at me if they wanted to. But either way, they flip over that. So that means I've got like a pretty free shot to just second Wren kill this Channeler. Now that I've picked up this Terminate, I feel pretty safe. It's like I'm protected from a big Goy for a Tombstalker or something like that. I know one of their cards is another Terminate, so we lead on the Ragavan just so if they decide to kill it, then I don't have to worry about them terminating my Shadow or my Goyf. And then here's like praying to the RNG gods, like don't flip over Delirium and let me take out a third Dragon's Rage Channeler with a Wren and 6. And they do not flip over Delirium. They don't have the land, so I get to take that out and just like double threat here. I'm usually a pretty big advocate of like not tapping Peatland till I have to, because I'm just like not gaining anything by tapping it aggressively. Like I'm putting myself down to 7 and maybe opening myself up to another death line that I didn't need to. And just like right there, they found another Terminate, took out my Shadow. So if they had a way to kill, or if since they had a way to kill my shadow. If I had pinged myself off the peatland, I would have just like done an extra point to myself that I didn't need to do. But because I waited, I could still do that peatland activation like at the end of their turn. But it gives me more time to make that decision of whether or not I actually want to. So yeah, go get Catacombs here so that I can fetch up Watery Grave and be able to drown in the loch like whatever my opponent does. So now I've got Goyf attacking through. I've got any big creature like Tombstalker covered with Terminate. I've got Renping plus Goyf for lethal next turn. So anything they cast, I can respond to with Drown, but they cycle and I assume hit like a land or something that didn't matter. And we get to take that one. So on to match number 3. Starting off 2-0-4-0. And we win a die roll. Crazy. Alright, good shadow hand. Like we've got turn 1 Ragavan, just like last time. We've got Bolt to clear out their blocker if they have one. Or we could like hit with Ragavan, bolt ourselves, play double shadow next turn. Either way, we've got some options. I like talking about the use of Mishra's Bauble a lot because I feel like it's something that isn't talked about as much as it should be. First off, there's no reason to crack the Bauble on my turn. I know I'm playing Ragavan. That's the best thing I can do. I don't have any reason to hold up mana on my opponent's turn. And so if I crack the Bauble on my turn, I'm drawing a useless card on my opponent's turn and potentially opening that card up to hand disruption. Because if they have some, then I just freely give them more information for no benefit on my side. If I wait and crack the Bauble on their upkeep, then I get to see what they're drawing for their turn. They don't get access to that card from me since I'm not drawing it until after my draw step on my turn. And it just saves a lot of percentage points in the long run. So bauble them, see a Hallowed Fountain, so I'm immediately assuming like blue-white control. Not blue-white control. Danger, danger, Will Robinson. Not blue-white control. Alright. So attack with Ragavan first because I would love my opponent to just like chump this. But alas, they don't. So main deck Soul Guide Lantern throws me a little bit for a loop, but I guess with like Urza's Saga, it's fine. So I tank for a bit, decide to play their Soul Guide Lantern because I can use it to just get a free redraw. I could have gone for Bolt their Ornithopter and then Soul Guide Lantern the Ornithopter, but at the moment I was planning on just passing with Bolt up, and then eventually decided like, hey, they had turn 1 Sigarda's Aid, Ornithopter. I can respond to the first hammer with a bolt, but if they have a second hammer, like, I just kill myself for no reason. So instead, I'm just going to bolt the bird and let them go. And when they play Sigarda's Aid, or not, when they play Urza's Saga, I feel really rewarded for that for that going ahead and bolting the bird plan. Because now I just get to, like, crack this Soul Guide Lantern for free. Something, something, mana efficiency. Street Wraith is good. It's like the important part about these turns right in here is knowing that my opponent can't play a hasty threat this next turn. So I'm pretty free to just like get down my double shadow, get an attack in here with Ragavan. Like, I'm not dying on the crackback. There's a reasonable chance if my opponent's going to play out a 2-drop next turn that I can bolt. Oh. Magic Online's being laggy even in the replays. So, not going to cycle the Street Wraith yet. I could and try to hit like another Death Shadow, but I don't feel like there's a huge benefit to it at the moment. But I can just hold up Bolt. How's Magic Online lagging on the replay? Alright, then Thoughtseize is really good. So now we got to start thinking about like life totals. So I'm at 11 with these 2/2 shadows. I can Shock to 9, Cycle Street Wraith to 7, Thoughtseize to 5. So now these shadows are 8/8s, and that's lethal with the Lightning Bolt taking out a blocker. So pretty straightforward. Knew that they were blue-white since I saw the Hallowed Fountain. Now I know that they've got Teferi. Decision doesn't matter. They don't have anything they can do. So I'm just making game actions or because I can than anything. And let's attack him with a couple of shadows. Realistically, attacking with Ragavan 2 would be correct, but since we know there's nothing they can do, we'll just take our game there. Alright. As weird as it sounds, I'm actually going to restart Moto in the middle of the feedback video because it's getting a little laggy. You guys can't know my login. Spoiler alert, it's a password. If you can guess it from that, I'm impressed. Alright, so let's get next. That was game 1. We need to get to game 2. And here we go. Alright. So on the draw for game 2 against Hammer Time. Boarding out a couple Street Wraiths because my life total is a limited resource here. All my Ragavans because it gets stonewalled from everything from like Mem Knight to Stoneforge Mystic to any constructs, Sanctifier, Esper Sentinel, you name it. Boarding out a Traverse because I saw main deck Soul Guide Lantern and I don't want to be too crazy on my graveyard. And then boarding out the 4th Thoughtseize because they're going to be emptying out their hand pretty aggressively and I don't really want to find a bunch of those late. Boarding in the 4th copy of Drown in the Loch, my 2 copies of Engineered Explosives, the 3 copies of Turok, because he's a great chump blocker. Not even chump blocker half the time, like Stoneforge or Pure Steel or something like that strapped up. He just stands in front of and dodges like all of their interaction. And then the last 2 were the 2 Alpine Moons, ported in for like Urza Saga, Ink Moth Nexus. Alright, so hand has got removal spell, 2 removal spells, a shadow. I can get all my mana online, Bauble to help redraw, so I'm going to keep it. Opponent mulls to 6. So let's see what they got. Alright. So I thought about the second Tarmogoyf, but decided I'd much rather just like have this removal spell, get the Tarmogoyf down on turn 2. And this is a point that I almost punt the game away. So my opponent gets Stoneforge or Stoneforges and gets Colossus Hammer. At the moment, I don't care about the hammer. Like, if their hand is Pure Steel Paladin, third land, hammer, something else, and their next turn is like play the Pure Steel, play the hammer, draw a card, then I'm pretty okay with that. So I'm just going to get down Tarmogoyf. In hindsight, I realized that my thinking was too tied to the Lurrus versions of Hammer Time, and I should have just drowned and locked the Stoneforge. The reason is, and I saw it game one, Cauldron Complete is in their deck, and Cauldron Complete is the best card they have against me. And if they're going to get a hammer with no Sigarda's aid for a turn 2 Stoneforge, then I should be assuming that they've got Cauldron in hand already. And sure enough, they do. So they can swing. We do find Battle Rage, which is huge. But I have to start thinking about if they have a way to equip a hammer and they hammer up the germ token, like I'm dead regardless. I can't do anything about that. I can't block and Battle Rage my shadow because indestructible. So we're just going to hold up Drown in the Loch. I could have played the EE on 1 there. Just to protect myself from the hammer, but if I do that, like I'm giving my opponent multiple free draws because I'm just not clocking them enough. And there is the Pure Steel, so we're going to go ahead and drown that. We could let the Pure Steel resolve, let them go to cast the hammer, and then drown the Pure Steel. The problem is we'd lose to Counterspell either way, right? Like if they have Spell Pierce, whether they Spell Pierce it now or later, it doesn't matter. But then they just like have a Pure Steel on the board. I feel like I'd rather just know if they have the counter magic right now. So that's why I just go ahead and drown it. Like, I'm going to die to the Spell Pierce. Either you've got it or you don't. Alright, so with this Catacombs, we can go down to 5, make the Shadow an 8/8, and attack with both. If they don't block, then I've got 6 trample off the Shadow and 4 more off the Tarmogoyf, which isn't lethal. If they do block, then I just lose my Shadow because of the indestructible exile clause on the germ token or on the Cauldron Complete. So attacking this turn doesn't do anything for me. So I can play the Peat Land, protect myself from the Saga tokens. I can't kill the germ, but I can kill anything that the Saga makes. And just try to play to lower my life enough to be able to attack through this germ. Which, if you know the math, you can't do unless my opponent decides not to block the Tarmogoyf as well. Like, this is essentially soaking up 10 damage, putting them at a virtual 25. Even a 12/12 Shadow with Battle Rage is only doing 24. So the Shadow itself can't kill my opponent right now. So this is where we get monumentally lucky. Which I think you have to have a little bit of luck to play the deck. So I'm okay with taking the hit for 5. Taking the hit for 5 means they're dead. So they need to make a play here. I've got EE covering the Saga. So they go for the hammer. They've got 1 card left in hand. If it's second hammer, I'm dead. Let's high roll the peatland. I hope this is syncing really well with the music on YouTube. Draw the Drown in the Loch. Get to counter the hammer. I really hope my opponent doesn't go back and see our Luxac plays on YouTube. But either way, we're just going to attack. Because unless they have something, which if they had a Spell Pierce or March of Otherworldly Light or anything, I would assume they would have used it by now. But we end up being able to take them down off of the lucky top deck Drown in the Loch. Of note, if that Drown in the Loch had been a Flusterstorm, we would have died. Alright. Match number 4. Probably the I don't want to say strangest, the most unexpected match of the league. You'll see why. On the play, really great hand of Inquisition into Tarmogoyf. We've got a Drown in the Loch. So if I get like a green source off this, I can Wrenn back the fetch land to get a Steam Vents afterwards. And it's Heliod. So when I say unexpected, could take a Skyclave Apparition, decide to take a Utopia Sprawl so that I can get down to Tarmogoyf on 2 and like start pressuring my opponent. Like they've got a pretty good interactive hand, but at the very least I can do something relevant. So here's Wrenn, get back a land. So now they've got access to Skyclave Apparition. Let's get some of these out of the way. And I assume they're just going to take the Tarmogoyf here, which they do. This does open things up a little bit, because like now I can play a Tarmogoyf next turn and hold up Drown in the Loch, which covers everything in their hand that I know about, and any potential top deck. I could play the Shadow, but at the end of the day, like if my opponent's going to get rid of something on my board, I'd rather them get rid of the Tarmogoyf than the Shadow. And they don't play anything, which is like the easiest. Okay, you have a collected company. We get it, you company. That does put instant in the yards. That grows Tarmogoyf. So decide to ping the Skyclave, play the second Wrenn, ping the Skyclave again. I can still play the Shadow. So at the very least, like I've got reasonable pressure. Spike Feeder's a little annoying. Especially Spike Feeder with this Conclave Mentor. Decide to... I could traverse for a Kroxa there, but just like playing Kroxa doesn't do anything for me. So I'd rather high roll the Street Wraith to try to find another piece of spot removal, hand disruption spells, something like that. Opponent's down to 4. Play out our Tarmogoyf. And survey says Heliod. So because they have, I've got 1 card in hand, they can beat double removal spell. I can't beat infinite life, so decided to just skip on to game 2. I say most surprising matchup I saw because I was completely certain this deck was like dead and buried and not to be seen from again. So first 7 we see has got Removal spells, hand disruption. If I don't see the second land, the hand's pretty dead, so I ship it. Let's talk about sideboarding. Alright, so board out a Wraith, because my life total can be relevant with things like Auroch Champion, Sanctifier on Vec that I can't block very effectively. Board out a couple Inquisitions because I don't want to be missing companies if I'm going to be casting Hand Disruption. And I don't want to have too many ways of playing into Veil of Summer. And then board out a Ren, because a lot of their deck revolves around 2 toughness guys. Ren down ping not being live is relevant. And 2 Ragavans, because they just have a lot of things that can stand in the way. So I really don't want to draw multiples. This hand a lot better. I think I end up bottoming the Bauble. Yeah. Just because I want to be getting like Ragavan down on turn 1. Ragavan down on turn 1, Ren on turn 2, and keep as much interaction as I can so Bauble's not doing a whole lot. This hand's got the upside of being able to go like Ragavan on 1. If they play like an Arbor Elf or something, I can take it out with Ren and then swing in and Thoughtseize. They do not have an Arbor Elf, and so they have the much more egregious Utopia Sprawl. So my plan now becomes like, I really want to get Tarmogoyf down. This is kind of an annoying one, because like, half of me is saying take the Heliod, like it's the big payoff, and that way they have to draw both pieces of the combo. The other half is saying take the Skyclave Apparition and get the Tarmogoyf down, and that way I can kind of like double up on my threats, and with the 2 threats plus the Drown in the Loch, I've got a reasonable chance of just like getting them dead before they get anything relevant off Heliod. Because if I play Tarmogoyf this turn, it's coming down as at least a 3/4. They can play Heliod. I'm attacking on my turn, and I get to play like Ren and hold up Drown in the Loch next turn. So I've got really good clock going. And so that's what I do. So I'm assuming they're just going to play Heliod here. Yep. Traverse isn't terrible. Now if Ren dies, I can pump it up. So opponent passing means I feel like it's another company. Sure's Bobbledger grows the Tarmogoyf. Conclave Mentor on their turn. They could have companied in response to my Drown in the Loch there. Or in response to my fetch there, so I couldn't Drown in the Loch. But ultimately, they decided against it. And now I'm like, I kind of need to cast this Drown in the Loch on something so I can traverse. I got to do the awkward like, hey, that wasn't in your hand last turn. So Sanctifier and Conclave Mentor come down. Pretty good, especially because this means I can't get Delirium now. I just kind of have to hope I naturally draw something relevant. So, hindsight, I should have Drowned in the Loch this this Conclave Mentor probably like right now. but my thought was just I wanted to be able to stop something more than like try to deal with something already on board. And then this gets to a point where I can't add any, or I can add sorcery with Traverse here, but that's all I can do. So if I Ren ping them, put them down to 6, then like Traverse would put them down to 1 if I decided to go for that route. But then I'm just like dead on the crackback. And March is going to draw the drown because I kind of, have to save my Tarmogoyf. So we crack in, play Shadow. Arbor Elf is fine because it dies to Ren unless they decide to go after the Ren with the Sanctifier here. And then this point, I'm pretty much in a losing proposition. I could Traverse and get the Tarmogoyf up to a 5/6. So they have to double chump block, but I still don't have an answer to the Sanctifier on Vec. And at the point right about here, we realize we have punted because I was playing this match with another guy in the Grimflayer Discord watching, and we both had that moment of, oh yeah, Conclave Mentor has a death trigger, and that trigger puts a counter on the Sanctifier, and that kills us. So I don't think we were winning this game anyway, but that just kind of solidified it. Like, I couldn't attack. I could attack with the Shadow and force a chump block with either the Conclave Mentor or the Arbor Elf, assuming they chump block with the Arbor Elf. And then I've just got this Tarmogoyf that has to stand awkwardly back, and yeah, just don't think that one was going the way we wanted it to. But that's okay because we have match number 5. And lost another die roll. So I think we were like 3 and 7 on die rolls. Siege Gigantha, so I'm assuming Tron right away. I could mull aggressively to try to get like Thoughtseize into Tarmogoyf. Ultimately decide I'm just going to like rely on Lightning Bolt and Bobble and this stuff and try to just get like a reasonable clock down. So if you've ever played against Tron, your opponent going turn 1 Tron land pass is like the most terrifying thing in the world because it's just, oh yeah, they've got natural Tron. Nothing I can do about that. The hope here is just that like their payoffs are subpar. But all I can really do is try to push my clock a little bit. I could bolt myself there, so if I draw a Shadow, I could cast Inquisition and Shadow. But ultimately, like, Inquisition isn't going to help against any of their real threats. So my hope is just to get down a clock and hope they don't have anything too good. Odo, why are you so laggy? Maybe it's me having like 12 apps open. Let's look at that. You guys can close. Alright. So, 3rd Tron land, and I'm dead. That's not 3rd Tron land. That's not going to get 3rd Tron land. So now you get that dangerous little like glimmer of hope. So we see that opponent kept a really interesting hand. Like obviously they could get third Tron land if they ever found map, star, sphere, forest, any of the above. So if anybody out there is a bigger Tron player than I am, which is literally anybody that's played the deck ever, tell me if you think this is a reasonable keep or not. Because like I'm assuming they didn't have maybe Blast Zone, third Scrying, or like Scrying Warping Whale or something, and drew into that, but I don't know. End up taking the Warping Whale because if they're gonna have a green source, like they're gonna get Tron regardless. Not a whole lot I can do. And then that does give us Delirium, so we can just go get a Shadow, play it out, and cross our fingers. And they just naturally draw the tower. Which this is a funny part because we were joking about it in our chat when this happened, like saying, oh yeah, we know there's a tower on top. Guaranteed. Like I know my luck against Tron, this is what happens. So when they ripped the tower off the top blindly, it was like, oh yeah, justified. Like, I know what I'm doing. Don't know what I'm doing. But we get to go to game 2 on the play, sideboarding against Tron. Take out a bunch of this 1 mana red interaction that doesn't do anything. Try to keep in some combination of bolts and Unholy Heat, because it's really nice to be able to bolt yourself for Shadow. And it's okay to Unholy Heat like a Worm Coil engine that's going to gain a bunch of life, or any of their Planeswalkers. But typically if a Planeswalker comes down, like it's already done its job before you get a chance to Unholy Heat it. So I don't want to go overboard on those effects. Board in a couple Turoks because I'm on the play and I've got Ragavan. And so turn 3 kicking a Turok could actually do something relevant. Board out a Traverse because of a like Relic of Progenitus. Board out a Wrenn and Sakes because it's just a little clunky and slow. Board in Spell Pierces. Board in the other Drowning Lock. Board in Alpine Moons. So let's see what happens. I mean, I know what happens. Y'all don't know what happens. Alright. So I contemplated this hand for a good bit. Reason being, I've got turn 1 Ragavan, which is like probably the best 1-drop I can have. And I've got the ability to get mana to get all of my other plays online. So I'm not worried about like not having the second land. The downside is if my opponent goes Tron land map, this hand is horrendous. If they go Tron land star or sphere and like need to rely on a Ancient Stirrings or something like that, then this hand isn't horrible. So we're just going to go with the upside of like finding relevant stuff. I figured I could crack the bubble first. Maybe I see a star or sphere on their side and it gives me a little more information. But ultimately I'm kind of leaving it up to the RNG gods to get us out of this bad matchup hole. So sphere is great. Second Ragavan on our side is awful. But here, like, lands are great. Hand Disruption would be great. I can get down turn 2 Shadow here and hold up Drowning the Lock. But we decide we're just going all out. And then they do not go to get Tron on their turn, which makes me think that they just have natural Tron again. I say again, Does it count as natural Tron if they just like blindly draw it on the third turn? Alright, and then Thoughtseize is a fantastic draw. So I want to cycle Wraith to get a little more information for me. They do have the third Tron land. And a Wilton and Nature's Claim, which I'm assuming they were playing around like Alpine Moon. But I always love that Tron brings like a whole bunch of those in even before they've seen hate. So I've got to start thinking about life total here. I Thoughtseize them. I go down to 8. I've got a 5/5 Shadow. Tarmogoyf grows to a 4. So that's 11 damage right now that I'm looking at. I could bolt myself and make it 14. But looking at the threats, like the thing that I lose to from this hand is Karn the Great Creator plus Ensnaring Bridge. So I'm going to take the Great Creator. If they want to play out a Karn Liberated and exile a dude, then I just get to like kill him with my other 2 dudes and Lightning Bolt. But I'm going to hold up this Drown in the Loch in case they decide to, I don't know, play like a map or something. Something that's not Karn the Great Creator. Or Karn Liberated. Like, I beat Karn. I don't beat something random that I'm not thinking about and Karn. But they draw another Karn the Great Creator. Go and get Bridge. So, or no, they get Ballista. Why did I think they got Bridge? I thought they got Bridge because they should have gotten Bridge. I guess Bridge wouldn't matter now. Scratch that. But I also have that terrible realization that I couldn't crack my treasure token during all this. So I'm like, oh yeah, if they go get Bridge, I can just Drown and lock it. And then I'll look down and it's all activated abilities can't be activated. And it's like, yeah. I guess we're just going to have to bolt a Ballista and kill them. Could bolt the Ballista, could bolt them. Doesn't matter. Either way, on to game 3. Alright, I don't think I make any play draw changes. I boarded out the third Turok and boarded back in the third Lightning Bolt. Turok a lot worse on the draw. It's like pretty good on the play if you can play it out turn 1, or play out your Ragavan turn 1, hit him on turn 2, play a Tarmogoyf for hand disruption, whatever, and then Turok on turn 3. Alright. Talk about this hand. I've got my best 1-drop. I've got a sizable Tarmogoyf. I've got an Alpine Moon. I've got 4 redraws at a red source, including 2 immediately. So this is the hand with like ridiculously high upside. If you can find like that red source. So I decided to roll with it. Like, this is a point where I really love league play because these matches give you a chance to test out those really sketchy hands that you're unsure about and kind of get an idea of exactly how likely it is to find what you need. Which, when you see your opponent go turn 1 tower expedition map and a wilt on top when you're staring at this Alpine Moon, you feel like there's not a lot you can do from here. But then they play basic forest and you're like, why did you keep this 7? So now with the Overgrown Tomb, I can play out a Tarmogoyf. Come on. So, I don't know if y'all have heard the ancient proverb, but having a Tarmogoyf is in fact better than not having a Tarmogoyf. So scrying there means they've got the third Tron land. I draw Blood Crypt, so I can get down an Alpine Moon now if I want to. Decide to dash Ragavan because it's pretty much a free attack here. Like, I still get the mana to cast my one red card, but I get an extra 2 damage in there. And decide to play out the Alpine Moon, naming the Urza's power plant, the one that they don't have access to. I don't want to name Tower and give my opponent green mana here, and so if they have like a Nature's Claim, they can just Nature's Claim the Alpine Moon on my end step, kill my Shadow, get to open up with Tron on their turn. I'd rather name the power plant so that if they want to get rid of the Alpine Moon, if they have like a Wilt or something, they have to spend mana out of their Tron to get rid of Alpine Moon. Like that. And then we knew about the Karn the Great Creator. So my thought here is with Tarmogoyf on board, they're probably just going to get like a relic or something. So they get a Tormod script. Alright. And this becomes an interesting turn coming up. Come on. Alright. So we've got 2 bolts. So I just need to get my opponent down to 9 life. Which I almost... I don't want to say punt. I don't think punt's the right thing to say here. But I almost like mess up enough to give my opponent out. So I play the Ragavan not tapping the Peatland here so that I can attack, and if my opponent Tormod's crypts, maybe I want to sack the Peatland after they crypt to add a land back in the yard. If they don't crypt, I'm just attacking them, going through, bolting them for lethal. So they do crypt, which means I can sack the Peatland to get the extra point, or I can deal 10 and just have the 2 bolts. The downside of the 2 bolt line is I've got to deal with whatever my opponent plays on their next turn before I can kill them. But if I crack the Peatland here, like I'm not making it so that I only need 1 bolt to kill them. And that's kind of the differentiating factor here, is I'm going to need both bolts regardless. So because I need both bolts regardless, I'm just going to hope that their last cards aren't second Tron land Ulamog. Because if they Tron land Ulamog, or I guess that wouldn't even do it because I'd still have 2 attackers, right? I was going to say they could get rid of both my red sources. But opponent plays a Worm Coil, so now they're dead even through like a Trinisphere or something. But we draw the Wrenn, and just to show off the power of Wrenn and 6, I decided to end the game with that one. So if anybody out there is doubting the power of Wrenn and 6, literally can burn your Tron opponent out from 1 life. But yeah, that is how that league wrapped up, to another nice little 4-1. So let's bring up the deck list here. Get some of this reorganized, talk about some changes. Alright, so I did like the list without Dragon's Rage Channeler more. I felt like there was much less conflict in the early turns like you're very much more clear. All right, I'm Hand Disruption into 2-drop. I'm Ragavan into Wrenn and 6. I'm Removal Spell into Tarmogoyf. Where Channeler adds another, like, okay, I've got Hand Disruption, Channeler, Tarmogoyf. Am I playing Hand Disruption on 1? Am I playing Channeler on 1? And then if I play Channeler on 1, am I playing Hand Disruption or Tarmogoyf on 2? And I think it just makes those first few turns a lot more, like, awkward, where cutting the channelers makes the decision trees a lot smoother, which for smooth brain people like myself is where we want to be. Drown in the Loch was really great. Obviously the mana can be a little sketchy. I think if Drown in the Loch ends up being something I want in the deck longer term, I'm probably going to end up cutting the traverses so that I only need green for Tarmogoyf. Maybe cut like peatland for a breeding pool or something, and cut the Watery Grave. It makes Kroxa a lot worse, so I'd probably end up having to cut Kroxa, but I could very well see like cutting those for to get a breeding pool into the deck over the Watery Grave. And maybe in those spots add like the 4th Drown into the main, 3rd Inquisition or something, 3rd Wrenn back in. In the sideboard, everything was pretty solid. We didn't see any real grave decks. EE, we saw Hammer Time but didn't need EE. Turok, I don't think we cast. I think we casted once against Burn, but not even kicked. Drown was fantastic. Didn't see Spell Pierce. Alpine Moon was good. Terminate would have been good against the Tombstalker matchup. But either way, there's some room to play there. I don't know what the next configuration I'll try out is, but it's probably going to start with some of those changes, like cutting this for the breeding pool over the Water Grave, and just a couple other pieces of interaction somewhere in the main, and we'll go from there. So if you enjoy the league, feel free to drop a follow, and that's about it. So we'll see you next time.